All right. Yeah, if you've had, the misfortune of attracting a narcissist in your life, then, this video is for you because, it's going to be really important for you to watch because, narcissists are great at manipulating us. They're great at scrambling our sense of self, making us question, well, just reality itself. And they do this, through manipulation, through scrambling just our sense of self. And because that's what narcissists do, it can feel like it's just hardwired into their brains or something, because narcissistic abuse causes trauma, and living with trauma is hard, because it's like you've been walking through your life and there's this storm brewing inside your brain, and it's just this constant hum of anxiety and fear and tension, and every moment feels like you're bracing for the next emotional hit. And maybe it's just like a slide remark that just comes out of nowhere, or a glance, or a memory that just kind of pops into our head. And it's just a small trigger. And your whole life tenses, and you're ready to fight or to run. And this is what life looks like when you've been through narcissistic abuse, because it's not just the mind that's affected. Your body becomes wired for survival, and that's draining us of this life energy, and can leave us feeling, exhausted. And what if I told you that there was a way to change this? What if you could turn down the noise in your head and just find calm amongst this chaos, and just get your body to relax again? And what if we could just train our minds even after like years of abuse? What does that actually mean? It would mean that we would finally be able to sit still, to breathe deeply, and feel peace, and starting to just flow back into our lives. And this becomes like really, really important, because that's exactly what the skill I'm going to take you through today is, and I'm going to help you do is observe the mind. And I know it sounds almost too simple, but it's not. It's not as simple as you think. Because mindfulness as a tool, that has a really powerful way of shifting the way that we experience our own thoughts and our own emotions, and even your body. Because it's not about ignoring your pain or pretending that everything's fine, because it's about creating a space for your true self to show up again, and one that's just free from a narcissistic traumatic past, because you've spent way too long reacting to those triggers that are inside you right now, and it's time to learn how to step outside of it. So watch it from a safe distance, and find peace, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to start that journey. And by the end of this session, you'll get an understanding for how to train our mind to calm our mind. And it's the key to reclaiming our mental and emotional well-being. And I'm going to walk you through just simple, powerful practices, that can help you disconnect from the trauma that's been running our lives, and reconnect to a calm that's always been there, just waiting for you. So let's break free from narcissistic trauma, because you don't need that constant tension that's running inside your mind. So just keep watching. And this is going to be the start of something that could be very transformative for you. And just post your comments in the comment section, and I'll take some time and I'll try to answer them as they come up. And I'm also going to share a link with you for the next Recovery Open House, and it's a live Zoom session that I'm going to host. And I can talk to you directly of what the recovery looks like. So here's the state of our bodies when we're experiencing narcissistic trauma. Right, the body is in a constant state of high alert. It's like an old alarm system that's just never stops ringing, and our systems are hypersensitive, flooded with survival hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, and they're just racing through our bodies at all times. And these hormones, they're meant to protect us, but in narcissistic relationships, they're perpetually on. So we can feel panic and anxiety and tension. It's as if we're constantly preparing for the next emotional attack. But what if I told you that we can begin to slow these triggers down? And the struggle for most of us is to reset our nervous system. Because imagine trying to reset a malfunctioning thermostat in your home, and the heat keeps blasting. But the dial just doesn't want to turn. because that's your nervous system under narcissistic trauma. It's overworked, it's overwhelmed, and unwilling to return to a peaceful state. And healing begins when we decide it is time to just sit still and time to just breathe and to tell our bodies it's safe now and we're okay. And it's not easy at first because it actually can feel very foreign because it's like you're trying to silence a storm that's been racing inside your mind for quite some time and one that you've grown used to. And it's normal to resist at first. After all, you've lived through just constant forms of narcissistic tactics and manipulation strategies. You're used to living in this chaotic world. But observing our thoughts gives us another tool to manage our internal storm, to gently turn down the noise that you can make you feel, you're resistant at first. You will feel resistance at first. That's completely normal. But as you stick with it, you start noticing a shift. And little by little, the chaos inside your mind will start to quiet down. And the real power of observing our thoughts is the ability to slow down racing thoughts, the panic, the hypervigilance, and the anxiety and the constant worry. It's just like a musician that learns to tune an instrument. Your mind can be slowly turned back to a place of peace. So imagine thoughts almost like it's an orchestra, and they're all playing at different volumes, and they're playing at different speeds. Nothing is in harmony. So it's just a mess of noise. But by practicing mindfulness, what we can do is we can stand in front of the room of our own mind and tap a little stick and teach our own thought patterns how to play a different symphony. And we can tune out our noise from our past, especially the distortions that we can experience through narcissistic abuse, the ones that they've kind of distilled and manipulated into our own reality. And the key isn't to ignore our feelings, but to sit with them, to allow space for them to breathe. As Tara Brock says, you don't have to fix your pain. You just need to be present with it. And that simple act of pausing, of bringing awareness to the present moment allows the trauma, the fear, the anxiety to start to settle itself down. And that's where the resistance means, right? It means that you're on the right path. And when you've been through narcissistic abuse, every part of you has learned to fight, to resist, to defend. The body's natural responses is either to shut down or to react very impulsively. But mindfulness teaches us to observe, not to react. And Dr. Ramani, an expert in narcissistic abuse, also the person who I got my narcissistic abuse clinician training through, often talks about how narcissistic trauma doesn't just affect the mind, it rewires our body as well. And observing our thoughts helps us to begin to recalibrate that wiring. And when you stop the fight or flight response, you open the door to healing. And it begins with a simple act of allowing our body to just settle. And when the body begins to quiet, guess what? The mind starts to follow. And observing, nature, it can calm our mind. So I just want you to imagine this. I just want you to picture a pond in your mind right now. And then, throw a thought into that pond. And see the water that's just distributed. What it does is it causes these little ripples to just spread outwards. And if we keep tossing stones into the pond, we keep tossing boulders and more trauma and more chaos, those ripples in the water, they get stronger. And if we don't stop ourselves, these ripples can actually turn into tidal waves of emotion. So we get to learn how to allow the pond to just be still. And what we'll find is the ripples will eventually fade on their own and the water will become clear again. And the same is true for us. Slowing our thoughts gives us space to let the ripples of just our experiences subside. And the chaos, it never lasts forever. If we create the space of our mind to give it space to go quiet, it gives us an opportunity to just kind of observe our thoughts. And then that becomes a tool that we can use for self-awareness. And since we've all suffered from narcissistic abuse, mindfulness becomes like stepping into the light. Think of it like a lighthouse that helps you cut through the fog. It's like a fog that we're talking about, because the manipulation and the control of a narcissist is just clouds our vision for so long that it's hard for us to see clearly. And it's not just about being aware; it's about being aware of what's real and what isn't. And narcissists, they make all relationships into something very distorted. And that means our thoughts and our feelings and even our own identity may have been altered over time through just repeated patterns of emotional terrorism. And when we practice, watching our thoughts as an observer of our thoughts, it's like taking a deep breath and clearing the way of these distortions, for us to see the truth again. And what gets in our way, so often within recovery, is self judgment. And so let's start by noticing self judgment when it's there, and then just turn it down, and from whatever traumas are just kind of playing in our minds. And it's hard to trust our own perceptions when they've been constantly manipulated. I know that. I know what it's like to be gaslit, because this is what we're talking about. When we've been gaslit into questioning our own reality, what ends up happening is that narcissists twist our reality, and it just makes things even more confusing. But mindfulness, it kind of gives us the power to reclaim what's ours. And what's ours is your mind, your clarity, your inner peace. It allows you to step away, disconnecting from, that constant barrage of noise, the criticism, the judgment, and the emotional manipulation that's just bouncing around in our heads. And watching our thoughts, well, I can feel like walking into a really bright room that's just filled with noise, and then learning to turn down the volume of that noise and dimming the lights enough for us to see what's actually there. And then suddenly, your mind isn't hijacked by someone else's chaos. It's just you in the stillness, finding yourself again. And I know it's hard to even fathom. I know. So let's start by seeing what happens when we start observing our thoughts as if they're not ours, right? Um, as we do, what we're doing is just we're separating ourselves from a part of us that is wounded. And it feels strange at first, and I get that, because narcissistic abuse have trained us to be very reactionary, to stay on alert, waiting for the next emotional attack, then the next, verbal hand grenade or chaos in any kind of form. But when you practice slowing down your thoughts, you start to notice something that's really incredible. That you begin to see that there's less noise there. There's less friction in our own heads, in our own thinking. And when you turn down the volume of these thoughts, there's less stimulation overwhelming our senses. And we no longer have to be on high alert 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can give your brain a chance to slow down, to rest. And this constant chatter of these narcissistic words, they're still there in our minds. Yes, I get that. We can see their spinning thoughts, the overwhelming emotions, those things that were just part of our everyday life, and they begin to quiet down. With enough practice, we can stop reacting to the narcissist triggers. Instead, we can create a space inside our own selves to respond with just more clarity and more clear vision. And they don't get to trigger us anymore, because you're no longer driven by the chaos of someone else's created in your mind. You begin to reclaim control of your own thoughts and your own reactions, because we can't do the healing work until we've created moments of stillness. And this is where the real healing begins, because to get this healing space in our own mind, there are things that can help, and you can figure out what works for you, right? It's just like, is it listening to soft music, is it taking deep breaths, or is it just simply sitting in silence, because you're constantly making space in your brain to rest. And it's the opposite of what the narcissists create, where they keep us overstimulated emotionally, psychologically, and even physically. And the narcissist influence keeps us in a state of just constant tension. And with teaching ourselves to just pause, we begin to clear out some of that clutter, because it's just like tidying up a room. And we take away all the distractions, the chaos, the noise. We create a space for ourselves to just rest and to breathe. And in that stillness, well, that's just a precious gift that you give to yourself, allowing your nervous system to reset and giving it time to be calm and to heal. Right. And the emotional and psychological clutter that's left by a narcissist can cloud, every thought, every action, every decision. In fact, many victims of narcissistic abuse describe feelings as though, they're walking through a fog, right? Because mindfulness, it helps us lift that fog because it clears our mental debris and creates a sense of peace, however small in our mind at first. This peace is not just the absence of noise, it's the return to clarity, of calmness, of finding that person within yourself, the person that you were before the narcissist came in and took hold of your mind and took hold of your thoughts. So slowing down these traumatic memories means that we'll be able to witness our traumatic memories. And this just isn't about, just being present. It's about stepping back from everything and everyone that is not serving you, including the narcissist, and finding stillness in our own minds. It's a radical act of self-love and self, preservation. Because reclaiming your inner peace and stillness is not passive. It's actually an act of defiance against the chaos that the narcissist has imposed upon us. They don't get to live rent free on our brains anymore. They don't. You don't need to keep reacting to a narcissist manipulation by practicing, observing your thoughts. You start to create space for yourself to just breathe again, to heal, and to reset control over our own life. You begin to actually break free. And the reality is that, past the drama and the stories that we all tell ourselves from narcissistic abuse, they're not serving us in this moment. And in the past, sure, I get it. In the past, sure. But in this moment, it's like, no, screw off, right? I'm taking this moment back. This moment is mine. It's just like that thought, those reactions, like dumbass ass clowns, right? Because the stories that we've lived, the narratives that we've been told, and the beliefs that we've been internalized, they're all part of the emotional wreckage that the narcissistic abuse leaves behind. And it's normal for our minds to be scrambled for some time. So long as these patterns that we were subjected through narcissistic abuse have been running the show in our minds, it makes sense then that we're constantly being on high alert, just trapped in cycles of worry and anxiety. It makes sense. And then whoops. So choosing to find these different spaces, these are really important in everything that we do and everything that makes sense, right? And we can start to hit the pause button on the chaos that's playing in the back of our minds. And most of the thoughts that are in there, you know what they are? They're a lie. These stories and these patterns, they're not serving us anymore. They once did. I get that. But we don't need that adrenaline right now. We needed it before to defend ourselves against those narcissists, those attacks. But we don't need it right now. We don't need it in this moment. And being in the background noise, it drowns out something that's really important. It drowns out our true voice because our true sense of self just gets diminished. It's still there, yeah, but we're not just running the show right now. The thoughts aren't running the show anymore. This part takes practice because the mind can't just turn the noise off on its own. So because it's been conditioned through narcissistic abuse, we're kind of used to that noise right now. Because why? It's familiar. So for so long, that chaos and the manipulation, the emotional roller coasters that we've been through, now what's actually left? We're now in this abusive relationship with our own mind, and our minds have a way of abusing us. And the trauma keeps playing the same old script, and telling us that we're not good enough, that we're unworthy, that we'll never escape or find peace. And this internalized narrative, is so ingrained that it becomes difficult to see it for what it truly is. A script written by others, by the narcissists, by the abusers, by the people who try to control us. So it's just kind of like it's time to just say stop. This is my mind now, and I'm going to take it back. Because when we start to take back our thoughts, what ends up happening? Our traumatized mind starts to freak out a little bit and it loses its shit. And this is when we begin to notice the urgency to do something, to check out, to distract ourselves. And I don't want to think about those painful memories anymore, right? You see why our mind does that. So the brain is like, where are my distractions? What about my TikTok feed? I could just kind of completely dissociate to what's going on with my friends' lives. I'm gonna go check that out too. What's the latest drama at work? These distractions keep us running in cycles and chasing after something external to fill that void. But all these distractions, they're simply a temporary escape from the real issue, the deep pain of the trauma that still lingers inside of us. And this is the exact dynamic that narcissists use to exploit. And that is what they use to control us, just to keep us reactionary. Because narcissists keep us on this string and they're just pulling us, with drama and unpredictability and chaos, making us, chase after their approval and their affection and their validation. Now, that same cycle is happening inside our own minds, and that deep trauma, that's there to help us work through, requires specialized support to work through it, and someone with trauma training, who can sit with you as you work through these things, as this trauma kind of comes out. In our recovery, we have several programs to help you with this. And you can visit www.narcovery.com. You have to put in the www for some reason, but you can book a session. You can see through the different programs that we have there, and I do hope you get a chance to check those out. Because what trauma does is it internalizes chaos. And in time, we start to abuse ourselves. And it's a pattern that we need help to break that pattern. Because we could be chasing distractions or numbing the pain with temporary fixes instead of just sitting down and just sitting there against our own will sometimes, sitting there with our own discomfort and doing the hard work of healing. Because it's like our minds are shouting, don't make me stop. It's nuts, I know, but it's like it's our nuts. And if it's our nuts, then guess what? We can fix it because no one else can fix our own minds except for us. And guess what? When a traumatized mind is looking at itself, it's uncomfortable, right? It can feel foreign to look inwards. It can feel foreign, and it can actually feel wrong at first because it's like the mind gets louder when we start to look at it and trying to quiet the noise. Our mind is telling us, don't stop me. I'm so used to that chaos. Keep doing the same thing. I like it. I like the drama in here. Keep reacting. Keep filling this void in my head. And this is the power that traumatic memories have over our own thoughts and our own thinking process. And it all stems from narcissistic abuse because over time, it's just like those patterns just get ingrained deeper and deeper. And this is finding that stillness and finding that calm is where we can start the work and begin the healing. Because trauma becomes familiar, even though it's painful. It's what we've known. And so, even in our healing journey, we might find ourselves unconsciously reverting back to these old patterns, to seeking that rush of distractions, to just silence the pain. But here's the truth: that this discomfort, this resistance, it's actually a sign that you're doing the right thing. You're doing the work to fix yourself. And observing our thoughts isn't about facing the mind to stop, like forcing the mind to stop. It's about allowing the discomfort to exist, but not reacting to it because you're not running from it either. And it's about learning to just sit with the noise and let it naturally fade away on its own. Because just like a storm, that chaos of our thoughts, it doesn't last forever. And the more that we practice, just staring at our thoughts from a safe distance, from a place without judgment, by taking moments to slow down, to stop reacting, if just kind of breathe, we start to just create space. And in that space, the mind finds its own peace again. It doesn't happen all at once, but with each passing moment, you'll notice that the noise begins to quiet and the stories from the past will start to lose their power. And so let's look at this form from the point of view of compassion, right? What's happening inside the mind of a narcissistically abused person here, right? It's like our minds are constantly throwing a temper tantrum, right? Because we can't help but notice it. And when we hear the thoughts that are racing, the chaos inside our mind, it just keeps intensifying. And it can feel like incredibly urgent for us to react all the time. And if we fight it, the mind says, "How dare you remove all that stimulation? I needed that." Right? And the mind, after years of narcissistic abuse, is conditioned to believe that chaos, stimulation, and drama are essential for survival. And it becomes a well-worn pair of shoes, or like a well-worn pair of shoes, or like a old song that's just constantly playing in the background. It's constantly demanding our attention because it sucks us into this loop. And if we try to fight it, oh, what does it do? At first, it actually gets louder. And if we distract ourselves, guess what? Those trauma loops, they just run for longer. So none of these tools, the distractions and avoidance, they never them work in the long run. Right? And this is the trauma response to being in a narcissistic relationship, because a traumatized mind doesn't want to calm down. It wants to stay in that loop. It wants to keep running the show, replaying the abuse cycle over and over again. And it's like a hamster on a wheel, but just it never stops and doesn't even take a break to rest, because the mind wants the drama, because it's all that it knows. And this is where watching the mind becomes such a powerful tool in the healing process. But here's the secret: when processing traumatic memories, we learn that not to react to the moments when they come up. And the key to separating from narcissistic abuse is not reacting to the provocations. And guess what? The secret to reclaiming our own minds is not to react to our own thought patterns. Instead, we begin to notice the noise, the thoughts, the inner chaos, and we witness it. It's there, but let's watch it. We don't have to engage in it, because it's as though that we're observing a child that's throwing a fit. We're recognizing that it's not about us. Not about it's about those old patterns that have just kind of stepped in and started to take control over us. And when we sit there observing our mind going wild without getting swept up in it, the mind may actually start by raging, because these old triggers may flare up. But instead of jumping into this reactionary cycle, what do? We simply just sit still. We do nothing. We don't jump into action. We don't feed these old trauma responses. And this is how we break that narcissistic cycle that's happening in our own minds. In the past, the narcissist would push all our buttons, find the places that still hurt, and then boom, we'd be reactive and we'd go into that cycle, would kick in. And that's what narcissistic abusers do to us. They push us into chaos. They feed our reactions and use our own emotions as tools for manipulation. But now we're no longer allowing that chaos to rule us. We're no longer the puppets on their strings. So what happens when the brain is traumatized by narcissistic abuse? It doesn't react to the old programming anymore, those old patterns of thinking. It's like hitting the brakes on a car that have been speeding through your life at full throttle. The old patterns begin to lose their grip. And instead of just mindlessly following, those old cycles, we don't react to the triggers. We stop. We simply let things be. We train our minds to rest and to settle just back into the present moment without engaging with any of those old programs. And this is where healing actually begins, because it's really important that we do that work. And it starts with making our minds less chaotic and making our minds feel more and more grounded, because it's not about forcing the mind to be quiet. It's about allowing the mind to do what the mind does. It's always done. It's like it thinks, it reacts, it's going to spin in circles. But choosing not to follow the programming all the way to the end every single time. And by learning to sit in our own discomfort instead of running from it, we slowly start to regain control of our minds. And this is how that we could start the healing process, by not reacting, but by just simply be. And this is where this becomes like a skill that we can start to use every day. The skill is observing thoughts. Imagine witnessing a traumatic memory, emotions, and flashbacks, almost like it's a movie. It's playing inside your mind. But instead of jumping into the story like we're used to, we're not going to sit back. We can now take a breath. We can now observe. Yes, those reactionary movies, they're still there, but we have space for them to exist, and we witness them without getting lost in every single one of them, right? And the moment of stillness is incredibly powerful because we watch our mind, react to this absence of stimulation. And after years of being conditioned by a narcissist, we're used to constant stimulation, gaslighting, emotional outbursts, manipulation. It's like our nervous system is programmed to expect chaos. But now we don't engage. We notice the absence of that chaos, and for the first time, we can sit with our stillness. And it's almost like the mind doesn't know what to do without those usual chaoses. Because instead of getting swept up in our old traumatic memories, we can turn down that volume, right? And that we don't get sucked into it anymore because we move the screen further and further and further away from us. We step outside the traumatic movies that are our mind that keeps playing and just watch it unfold from a safe distance. And in the stillness, in this moment, there's nothing traumatic happening. Right now, there's nothing traumatic happening. And this is what healing looks like. And I know, we can ask ourselves, why do we have to watch these traumas now? It's painful to see. We watch them again and again and again because, it's just like we're in the middle of that storm. And we're just in the thick of this narcissistic abuse and the storm of these emotions and these pains. They can be so overwhelming that we could see the truth in the situation in that moment. Yeah, I get it. We were blind. We were. So the mind said, no, no, we can't deal with this right now. This is too much. Let's just park this. And we were too deep in the chaos in the past to actually witness those things. But now, with the safety and the space that we're in, now that there's some distance from whatever happened, we can anchor into this moment and we can look around and we can see, is there any danger here right now? Like, is there any single danger here right now? And then if there is no danger, then it's like, all right, let's dig in. Let's anchor in deep because in this moment we're going to stand on solid ground, right? Because we're no longer in danger from the narcissist in this moment. We might be later, but right now, everyone is here, right? And in time, with repetition, with practice, the self-abusive thoughts, the patterns that may have once controlled our emotions, our reactions, our thoughts, and now they have less power from us because we've learned this new skill. The skill is to witness without reacting. Because the narcissist no longer has the control over us that they once did. And in this moment, with a little bit of stillness, a little bit of stillness, we're free from the narcissist's influence, right? Because it's like stepping inside after being outside during a storm that you've survived, right? I get it. Like the storm is still out there and it's battering rain on the window, but the water is falling outside the window. It can't harm you because you're inside. And you can watch the storm rage, watch it through a window, but you don't have to get swept away. There's no tornado that's going to take you up and take your house from Kansas up into the sky, right? Because this is what healing actually is. When we can finally observe the storm of trauma without letting it control us, because that what a mind has been traumatized through narcissistic abuse, and what it needs to learn is to do its best not to feel or experience anything that isn't present in this moment, and that takes time for us to learn. And for somebody whose mind has been in a constant state of survival, constantly reacting to the chaos, created by the narcissist, learning this skill, it takes time because we're trying to show our mind that this moment isn't about forcing anything to happen, that it's one of the first shifts that observing our thoughts brings to us, right? Because it's allowing things to be exactly as they are. And when we've been conditioned By a narcissist, every little trigger used to send us spiraling. Every single word, every single look, every little silence, and those little cues that they would force a reaction from us in some way. But now, in this moment is different because it's not about trying to feel something just because there's a traumatic memory that just magically appeared. We don't try to force any emotions to show up, or just try to dissipate them or shoo them away. We just need to sit calmly and allow our mind and body just to catch up with this moment, right? And letting this moment be with a bit of presence, with a little mindfulness, right? It's allowing it to exist, our thoughts to exist without judgment, without forcing, without trying to control it. Because this is what healing actually means. Because getting past the past of ours, it doesn't dictate our present anymore. And the narcissists, they don't have control over our emotional reactions anymore. Because it's like stepping off an emotional roller coaster and allowing yourself the freedom to just be, to be in the present moment, to allow those thoughts and those feelings to pass without letting them take the wheel. Because in this moment, you're not just constantly reliving the traumatic and the abuse, because you're no longer in that storm. You're just observing it. And there's a bit of a distance, a space for traumatic memories just to be. And with, a trauma informed guide, someone like me, it's just like we can help you process those traumas and change your relationship to them. And it starts with stillness, because you begin to reconnect to that part of you that was lost in the chaos, and the part of you that knows, how to sit and doesn't know how to sit in the pain. But when we can figure that out, it's just like we do find peace, right? And when we're away from our narcissist, away from those triggering places, that used to dictate our emotions and our thoughts, we can begin to practice just sitting in the emotions and doing it from a place without a reactionary state. And this is the real turning point for victims of narcissistic abuse. This is a huge shift. Narcissistic abuse, it thrives in our triggers, right? They need those triggers in order to control us, a little marionette, because it's just like they want those knee jerk reactions and just emotional chaos. 'Cause when you're in those environments, it's like walking on a tightrope, right? When you would never truly be able to relax, because at any moment the narcissist could push us into just this toxic abyss of thoughts and emotions. But when we start sitting with difficult emotions, not running from them, not judging them, not reacting to them, we don't have to chase every single thought. Yes, we can have them. We can absolutely have thoughts. I get that. I have thoughts all the time. But the whole thing is, it's just like we don't need to get swept away by them anymore. Like we just don't. Because it's like standing in front of like this rushing river. Imagine you're just standing by a river and there's a rushing river going by. But instead of jumping in, we simply watch as the current passes. Because the thoughts, they are going to come. They're going to be like waves that are crashing on a shore. We don't need to drown in every single thought of every single trauma again and again. We can watch it as it comes and as it goes. And the moment that we create for ourselves, these moments can be so powerful, because these moments, there's a little pause that we can do through our traumatic thoughts. It can become a turning point for so many victims of narcissistic abuse. And for many of them, it's life changing. Because what has a narcissist actually taught us? You know, they taught us that our thoughts and our feelings, our very selves, were something to be controlled and manipulated. But you know what? We can change that. Because here's the shift, because we begin to reclaim our power. Because right now, the thoughts can still come. Those painful memories, the gaslighting, the judgment, and self doubt, they can come, but we don't have to follow them. We don't have to let them rule us. Those thoughts, they did rule us for a short time. They did, but not always, and not anymore, and could sure as hell not forever. So we can stop letting our traumas from narcissistic abuse dictate our every single move. And here's where we face this little bit of a paradox. The more that we don't react, the less power our traumatic memories have over us. Because if we keep reacting, what are we doing? we keep getting sucked into those emotional triggers. And what happens then? It's just the floodgates of emotions just kind of open. And when we sit in stillness without judgment, without urgency to act on our thoughts, we can slowly start closing those floodgates. And it's like teaching our minds that we are not rewarding the trauma by giving it all of our attention. Because it's not about pushing thoughts away, it's about being present enough to let them come, let them be seen, and then let them go without getting caught in those old patterns and emotional reactions. And this is a powerful tool for all narcissistic abuse and trauma survivors. It teaches us to stop reacting to our past, and teaches us to watch our past from this present moment, to step inside, this endless loop of reactivity, and step into a space where we simply are just present and grounded and aware of what's happening inside us without needing to follow all these old narratives all the time, right? Because in time we do learn to recognize these traumatic thoughts as not just part of us, but as part of something that has come to visit. And imagine it like this: the younger version of you, the one who lived through that trauma, it shows up in our minds through painful thoughts and memories. You, the older, wiser you, the one that's here right now, when these thoughts come, it's just like practice, being there with a little bit of compassion for them. Instead of shooing them away, or trying to avoid them in some way, just kind of say, thank you for showing up. I'll think about what you're saying later. But right now, what? I need some space. And by acknowledging the presence of these intrusive thoughts or flashbacks, we can start to create space between us and the trauma instead of being enmeshed in the memory, instead of reliving, with all the pain and all the confusion. We start to, stand firm in the present moment with quiet, but a powerful, decision to not get pulled back. Because, it's just like you would just kind of ask somebody to just give you a little bit of space. They're standing too close to you. Right? We do that with our own thoughts. We just ask these intrusive thoughts to step back a little bit, just so I can breathe, just so I can regroup a little. And then in that space, that's where we can start to begin to recreate some control. Because what happens in this space is significant, because you allow yourself the freedom to respond rather than to react. And that is a powerful shift. Because in the past, the flashbacks and the intrusive thoughts that many victims of narcissists experience can trigger a whole flood of emotions, making you feel as if you were just drowning in them. But now, hopefully, you're learning to create enough distance to feel that freedom of choice. Because it doesn't mean the thoughts disappear; they'll still be there, but we feel more like they're like a lingering guest that's kind of further in the background. But they no longer have the power to take over. They no longer, like Dr. Richard Schwartz, the founder of IFS, who I got my IFS training from. He says they no longer overwhelm, because we can just ask them, please don't overwhelm. And we can hear their stories. We can process the experiences. And once we have meaning from them, they don't need to overwhelm us anymore. And as we heal, we start to notice how much space that these traumatized parts of us give us. Because the more that you practice this, the more space that you get from it, until one day you can be fully present and in this moment and not haunted by the past for days and weeks and years on end. And these thoughts, right, they become like children running in the background, and that just want to be held tightly, want to be held with their grief. And they just want to hear you say, I see you, I hear you, I love you, I am you. And I can't let you keep pulling me back into this pain again and again. Share your story if you'd like. I'll make you feel better, but then I do have to ask that you step back. And you're not rejecting your feelings or your experiences or your interjects or your shadows or your critics or your managers or your firefighters. You're not rejecting them. You're simply creating a distance necessary for healing. You're giving yourself permission to feel without getting lost in the traumatic memory. And there are so many times when we, as victims of narcissistic abuse, experience intrusive thoughts or flashbacks when we need to be practicing, putting up boundaries. We practice putting up boundaries with narcissists, sure, but we actually have to put up boundaries with our own selves. Healthy boundaries, firm boundaries sometimes. And this is where we can start, building that mental muscle, teaching our minds how to create distance. And it's a balance that we can create inside us. We don't need to deny our thoughts, nor do we need to judge them. They're there. Get it. Because it's easy to fall into autopilot mode. And we learn during these narcissistic relationships that this learned helplessness that they train our brains to engage in, where the triggers are constant and we react on impulse, often without thinking. The traumatic cycles, it's like a hamster wheel that's just spinning faster and faster and faster and with no way out. But, we can step off because we don't have to live in that reactive state anymore. And being the observer of our thoughts, our traumatic memories, this gives us the tools to separate ourselves from the triggers and our reactions. In the moment that we start to feel our minds getting overwhelmed with narcissistic triggers, the memories, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the judgment, that we've absorbed, it's in those moments that we can create these little breakthroughs because we can choose stillness over chaos. And it is a quiet rebellion against the old patterns that have manipulated us, that have kept us stuck in fear and survival mode. Because we're no longer ruled by the trauma. We're choosing peace, we're choosing awareness, but most importantly, what we're choosing is we're choosing ourselves. We're disrupting old patterns of thought and patterns that affect the quality of our life. And for so many survivors of narcissism, this is incredibly important, right? Because this makes sense. Like, because for years, our minds have been trapped, looping through the same old toxic abuse patterns and the same old memory script. And through separating ourselves from those thought patterns, we begin to teach ourselves a new way to respond. It's like actually teaching ourselves how to change the channel on a TV. But the thoughts and the programs that are running on the TV are our own thoughts, they're our own memory. And at first, it can feel almost impossible. Yeah. But little by little, we begin to breathe through the discomfort of the change and gently shift the channel in our own minds. And we're no longer held hostage to old flashbacks and memories that we once believed that defined us. And in this process of change, we stop letting the abusive environments of our past dictate our present or our future because it's not about erasing memories. It's about regaining control of how much space that those memories occupy in our own minds, because it's about learning to witness these memories that we experience from narcissistic abuse with a different lens. Because these beliefs that we once held, we no longer allow them to hijack our emotional state or control our behavior. We have the power to choose a different narrative now. It's like hitting reset, choosing to step out of the loop and it kept us trapped in the past. Instead, what we're doing is we're stepping out into our own peace. We're reclaiming the power of the stories, of our own narratives, the ones that we tell ourselves. And this is the path to freedom. It's one small, mindful step at a time. And by doing the trauma work with a trauma informed recovery specialist, someone like me, we can begin to disengage from letting our thoughts define our present experience. And the shift is key to our healing. In this approach, we can start to see this moment as separate from our traumatic memories. From the beginning, before beginning the work from recovery from narcissistic abuse, thoughts would come up and they would just kind of say, hey, this is me. But, through trauma work, the awareness of self and the introduction of self-compassion comes in, and we can now pause and say, yeah, no, those thoughts, those memories, those were me, but this is who I am now. And this process creates space between our thoughts and our true identity. And thoughts and memories, especially those that are tied to experience with a narcissist, they will still come and they will still go. But we don't have to let them, define us anymore. And mindfulness and trauma recovery, they teach us something. We're not bound by our past. Our thoughts are our thoughts. We have them, but they don't have the same weight that they once did. They are temporary. They are transient things that do not to be need to control our reality. And this is what trauma work actually means. It's a process of teaching us how to recognize that we can have trauma, yeah, but we've been through deep, painful experiences. Yes, very true. But those experiences don't define who we are as a person. And it's just not what happened. Right? And you realize that there's so much more that's happening to you, and that you learn to define yourself outside of the trauma, and you step into the future that's truly yours. And to face our traumatic memories requires courage, it requires persistence, it requires all the skills that you learn through trauma work, because it's all part of the healing process, right? Because for a mind that has been deeply traumatized by narcissistic abuse, it can feel like, we're standing still where the world is just constantly spinning around us. And it's hard to feel grounded. And that noise from our past, the emotional attacks that come, they can just keep coming if we don't do something about it. But this beautiful shift becomes that we can connect to something real, something in the present moment. Like something in this moment. It could just be as simple as a simple breath. There's simple feeling the ground beneath your feet. The feel of a soft fabric against your skin. It's just the vibrant colors, just noticing the colors that are around us. We begin to anchor ourselves into this moment. We anchor ourselves into now. And these small and solid little things that we do in the present moment, they can keep us from reacting the way that we once did. And in this space, we can stop engaging with every dramatic thought, every flashback, every trigger. And we can choose to put the chaos of our minds behind us. And this is what trauma recovery is in a nutshell. It's a practice of standing still and noticing the noise. And in time with separation, that's where we start to create the space for healing. And here's the truth about narcissistic, abuse survivors. Right? It's like having our mind that's just a magnet. It's constantly being pulled out of this moment and getting pulled into the past. The mind doesn't want to go there. It actually doesn't, but it just takes us there anyway. And until we do the work, and whether it's working with a professional to help release some of those old traumatic memories, the next best thing that we can do is teach ourselves not to react when those thoughts kind of come up, even though we can't choose when they do. But here's the key to breaking the cycle: when we place our attention where our attention goes, energy flows. Think of it almost like a flashlight, right? Where you point it is where the light goes, and that's where your energy also goes. Now, if the flashlight is pointing at your future, at something peaceful, at something that brings you calm, your energy flows in that direction. But if your flashlight is focused on those painful memories, the flashbacks, that's where your energy goes. Right? And it's just like, feeding a monster, because the more you feed those memories, the bigger the monsters grow. So we start to learn how to turn the tables on our own trauma. We choose, where we shine our own light. And yes, we may not be able to stop those memories all completely, but we can slow down our thoughts and start coming through things like right away. We can choose to engage things that are more positive, things that are more uplifting. And then all of a sudden, survivors of narcissism, they start to realize something: that if your energy wasn't drained on this constant treadmill of thoughts and trauma, where can we focus that energy? Well, if we can observe our racing thoughts as they're racing on their own, without giving them any more fuel and to keep them going, then there's a shift that happens. And the shift is the perspective. It's that break that just breaks that cycle. And when we stop giving our attention to traumatic memories, what happens to the mind? Our mind's quiet, and the racing thoughts, they slow down, and they no longer dictate the course of our lives, right? Because traumatic recovery, gives us the power to choose stillness instead of, running on this hamster wheel of emotions and memories. Because, what we do is we stop pouring our energy into those old victim stories and those old patterns. Because, it's like closing a valve on a leaky faucet. It's just like dripping. And what does a drip sound like? It just says trauma, 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 trauma. And it does that all day long, just like a dripping faucet. And by doing this work, we're no longer feeding that trauma cycle, right? And we can begin to regain our energy, and we can regain our peace. So I am going to wrap up, and I do want to leave you with this truth. Healing is not a destination. Healing is a journey, and a journey that requires patience and self compassion and the courage to make space for our own growth. Because every step that you take, no matter how small, what is that? That's a victory. That's a victory that's worth celebrating. And the moment that you choose to pause, to breathe, to allow this storm inside of our minds to settle, what are we doing? We're creating a space for, your true self to emerge. And this recovery journey of ours, it's not going to be linear. There will be setbacks. There will be days when the weight of the past feels so heavy, in the moments where it can feel like you're just standing still. But that's part of the process. It's through the pauses, the moments of stillness, that we actually reclaim our power. And the part of you that is already healed, because there is a part of every one of us that's already healed. It's always there. It's waiting there to help you, guide you, to turn down that noise. And here's the thing, it's like you don't have to do this alone. Professional support is not just a luxury in these environments, it actually becomes essential to reclaiming our lives. Because when you work with somebody who truly understands the depths of narcissistic abuse and the transformative power of mindfulness, you're not just healing, you're stepping into your own power. And healing is not about fixing what's broken, because you're not broken. What you're doing is rediscovering the strength and the clarity and the peace that's already within you. And with the right tools and right guidance, you can just rebuild your life. We'll rebuild it on your terms. So just take a deep breath and trust that you are on the right path. And you can reach out to me. Just post your comments in below, and there are links to my programs in the descriptions. And I've helped like 1,000 people through this already. This recovery process. I have hundreds of hours of clinic time, and under my belt. And I would love to see how Narcovery can help you. So you can visit me at www.narcovery.com. Make sure you put in the www for some reason, and to find out more. B says, I don't know, I'm dealing with a narcissist or psychopath, but my eyes were awake one day when he demanded that I open my phone to. Yeah, yeah, no, they can be very controlling. And what you're going to find actually is just the insecurity that's there to look into someone's phone. That's kind of funny, isn't it? That they become that insecure that they have to judge everything. It's kind of funny. Um, and The Voss says, "Why is a narcissist so vague?" I'd like to know. I'm frustrated. Quite often that sounds like an avoidance strategy, and it could just be a power play too. There's so many different reasons why narcissists could be a little vague. But I'm glad. I hope everyone got something out of this, and I do hope that you enjoyed my feed. And thank you so much for watching.